All right. Welcome to another parenting and mental health series by Bay Community Health. I'm Dr. Court and glad to have you here. So tonight we are going to spend some time. I've been trying to connect everything over the past few weeks. 'Tis the season. Christmas is in the air. It's festive and people's hearts are filled with joy, right? Yeah, well, maybe not always. In fact, unfortunately, a lot of times this time of year, people feel super anxious, depressed, lonely, so many other things in between. And there's a lot going on, right? So we have our normal everyday lives, then coupled with all of the holiday cheer that comes along with it. So the past couple weeks, we've been talking about gratitude and how volunteering and giving can actually help create those natural neurotransmitters that are kind of the perfect recipe for happiness, and how giving and volunteering can help do that or bring that about in your body. So tonight I'm going to take a step back from something that's a little less technical, but a lot of research still behind this, and we're going to talk about just how to manage holiday stress. As parents, we have to manage so many things. So tonight we're going to talk about that. I'm going to give a stress quiz in the beginning. Don't worry, it's not graded. It's just for yourself to kind of think through. Going to give some tips for both parents, adults in general, people in general, and also things that you can do to reduce the stress for your kids as well. And then we'll have questions and answers at the end. So if you have questions, I invite you to write them down or put them in the chat, and I'll make sure that we cover them at the end, because as we know with these sessions, people may come and go. And oftentimes I try and do the little bit of the talking up front, and then we have a discussion at the end, and I'll stop the recording at the end. And if you hear snoring, for those of you that have been to Bay Community Health, you know my therapy dog Bentley is my live noisemaker. So if you hear snoring, that's who it is, in case you haven't met her before. Okay, well, let's get going. Thank you for those that are joining, and thank you to those that'll check us out on YouTube or Facebook later. First thing I want to go over is I want us to take a little quiz, and I want you to take a moment to just read through these and answer these for yourself. If you'd like to share how many of these are true, you can throw them in the chat box. Just want to see where you stand in terms of holiday stress. Now, if you're anything like I was a few years back, you probably put down 6 out of 6 were true. If you answered more than, if any of these were true, there's definitely some holiday stress that we can reduce. And if you did say true to more than 4, please, please, please stay on. We'll definitely talk about most of these things today. And I see a type. Okay, well, I'll get that later. I want you to look at these for a second, and just for fun, think about which of the following is the best way to ease the pressure of the holiday. For number 1, if you looked at it, welcome, welcome. We just got started. We're doing a little bit of a quiz. If for the first one, you look at the best way to ease holiday pressure, probably indulging in holiday treats, while it's very tempting, is not our best way to ease holiday pressure. Perfecting your grandmother's ancient cookie recipe, also probably not the best thing to ease your holiday stress, unless you're someone that cooking creates a Zen moment for you. If you are, then wonderful. Actually, watching a funny movie was probably, more people will answer that as being the space that would be the least pressure during the holiday. And it's just a gentle reminder that we want to have fun and laugh during the holidays, as stressful as it may be. And to avoid getting overwhelmed during the holidays, doing your best Grinch impression is probably not your best choice. Saying no gracefully or consolidating activities may be good ways to reduce getting overwhelmed. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit as well. Okay. Now, I want you to answer the next few questions with your kids in mind. Just to yourself. And again, if you'd like, you can share how many of these you answered true or yes to in the chat box, just to get an idea of how stressful holidays might feel for your kids. Oh, all I want you to do, thanks for the chat. All I want you to do is read these questions with your kids in mind, right? So I think it's important to have my kids go to every holiday activity that they have been invited to. If you generally think that's true, then that would be a true or a yes. You just go through the 7 questions and they're basically true or false or yes or no answers. And if you want to share, you can put in the chat box how many of these you'd answer yes or true to. Only 2. Okay, someone has gotten stress under control. I'm impressed. I've had a lot of people answer these questions in our office at Bay Community with, 6 or 7. I often try and talk to them offline. Good. Well, you are an expert, it sounds like, and we will definitely be pinging you later for good stress reduction holiday advice. I think that's great, Colleen, that there's only 2 there. So, and then for anyone else that joined in late, I can give you the other quiz, or you'll see it. I can post the actual slides to the Facebook as well, so you can go through the slides on your own without having to listen to the whole video. So let's get into it. So in surveys from the American Psychological Association, they do a survey every year about the holidays. And in every survey they've done in the past years, at least 8 out of 10 Americans anticipate stress and anxiety during the holiday season. In fact, it's found that, so while that's 80%, they also reported that 75% of that 80% reports money as being their most significant source of stress during the holidays. While I'm not a financial advisor, we will talk about a few things related to finances that can impact yourself during the holidays. APA also found out that women are more likely to report heightened levels of stress during the holidays and are less likely to relax. There are so many reasons that could be, which we probably won't get into tonight. I don't want it to be a battle of the genders, but we will talk about a lot of ways to reduce stress during these times. And all of these surveys, they included things like we said, like expenses and money being significant, lots of traveling. And certainly today, I hear so many horror stories about traveling on the airlines or getting stuck in traffic on the highways. So that can add to your stress. People overcommitting. We see that during the regular year. Why would it change during the holidays? And that, adding that, hey, well, maybe, that fear of missing out. So many people want to make sure they get to everything. I'm definitely guilty of the overeating. There's always so many goodies that people make. I just want to try all of it. And I just want to be polite, really, right? Yeah, well, we need to watch that too, because a lot of sugar can really affect our mood, as can overeating. Grief happens for a lot of folks this time of year. This is a time when we miss our loved ones the most. And it's important to talk about those things. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Short days. The sun isn't out as long. And for some folks, that really impacts us. and seasonal affective disorder is a real thing. So getting your vitamin D, at least as a supplement, or getting outside while there is sunshine, maybe on your lunch break, is really, really important. And then for so many of us as parents, we really just want our kids to have good memories during the holidays. And so we get really stressed out that we can't fulfill our kids' wishes. And that becomes a source of stress. So related to that, I just want you to reflect for a moment. Take a minute to think about the holidays last year. Maybe it was an abnormal holiday, but just think about last year and think about what went well. And what were the activities that actually made the season feel really special? I want you to take a moment and I want you to think about what the major stressors during last season were. Maybe you're recognizing that some of those major stressors were some of the things we just mentioned, right? Maybe you traveled a lot last year, or maybe there were some things that happened that were unexpected and not necessarily fun. Maybe it was a really easy holiday last year. If so, great. One more thing I want to touch on is, what are the shoulds that you have on your list for this year? So now you've thought a little bit about last year. I want you to think about the shoulds, the things that you should do during the holiday season. I want you to keep those in mind for the next little bit. Yes, last year, every year, your kids are constantly arguing, but that's always fun. And that is a little bit in our control and a little bit out of our control, unfortunately. And we can talk about that more, and some tips around that in the next few slides, because the arguing might have a lot of sources. So thanks for bringing that up. So related to kids, now that you have those things in mind, I want you to kind of put a pin in these reflections. We're going to come back to them at the end of the session. I want to take a minute to talk about the signs that your kids might be stressed out, because sometimes, as we know, kids aren't as good at articulating what's going on with them, right? We as adults, live stressed out. We'll tell people we're stressed. We'll tell people we're too busy. And sometimes we forget that our kids can be really stressed out during this time too. And so there are some things that you can look out for that might be signs of stress. Getting tearful for something that isn't something they normally get tearful about. Okay. You all know your kids best. So I'm not about to give an example, because every kid is different. Some kids cry at things that other kids would never cry over, and that's kid dependent, but you know your kids best. So if they're crying for something they normally wouldn't cry about, that's when you want to hone in on it. Nervous behaviors like nail biting, hair twirling, pulling out hair, pulling or chewing on sleeves. I see kids sometimes they'll pull or chew on the sleeve of a sweatshirt or a sweater. There are a lot of other nervous activities, but those tend to be ones that stand out the most. Sometimes rubbing or scratching incessantly can be another one. Physical complaints. Headaches and stomach aches are big ones for elementary age kids, because again, they might not have the words for what's going on. So they will create a lot of anxiety and they'll actually develop physical symptoms. And so we treat the physical symptom thinking that it's a physical ailment, and sometimes it's the anxiety or the stress. We all love this one as parents, when they regress to an earlier age state. Either they start throwing tantrums, or maybe they start bedwetting again, or having accidents at school when they haven't done that in years. Those are all possible signs that they may also be stressed out. It also could be a one-off, but if it happens more than once during this time of year, definitely might want to really check in with your kiddos about what's going on. Not wanting to do things they normally want to do. So this one says withdrawal from school, friends, and family. Yeah, it can be withdrawal from anything that normally was joyful for them, right? And of course, these are all kind of tied to an obvious change in behavior. So if suddenly your child's acting really differently and there's not an obvious explanation for it, it might be anxiety or stress. So those are just things to look out for. again, I also want to say again that for a lot of these, you want to see that it's a pattern or it's something that's happened more than once. If they have an accident once, you know, it happens, right? And not to make too big of a deal out of it, but just checking in with your kiddos about how they're feeling. And, if something feels stressful, that can be helpful. So let's get into what we can do to make the holidays less stressful, right? I know that's why you're here, what people want to talk about. So I have some things. I pulled some resources, everything from American Psychological Association and American Pediatrics and psychiatric associations to places like NAMI and some other child-related organizations, and kind of put together a list of things that they all seem to have in common, and ones that I too have found to be helpful, both myself and what I've seen helpful with folks that I work with. I put them into three big kind of chunks. One is managing expectations. So we want to find some sort of balance between structure and freedom, which is, of course, the keeping of the routine. And then we want to schedule some downtime. So talking a little bit about that, we'll get into details about it. Keeping a routine requires planning ahead, looking at schedules, making sure you're communicating with those that you live with, and for those that have blended families, or an ex-partner where you have to share homes and share holidays, can be really important to keep the communication open so that you know what's expected and also know what the routine's going to be. Keeping routines that they had normally will be really important, and then scheduling downtime. And I say scheduling downtime very purposefully, because for so many of us, we say, oh yeah, I'll get downtime later, or, I'll give myself downtime after the holidays are over. We need the downtime while we're dealing with a stressful event. We're not meant to have chronic stress for hours and hours at a time. We're meant to have little short bursts of stressful events followed by periods of active recovery. So scheduling some downtime every day, especially during the time where the kids are off, and downtime for your kids will be really important. So we're going to go into those three things. So first part is making a plan for these things. So how do we do that? Let's talk a little bit about managing expectations. So first of all, the holidays don't have to be perfect. I always say in these sessions, perfection's a myth. A diamond actually isn't perfect, and that's what makes it a diamond. If you want a perfect diamond, you can buy a cubic zirconium, which is man-made and is inherently perfect, right? But nobody wants that. They want the diamond. So remember, holidays don't have to be perfect either, right? And it's not about perfection. It's about being together. And so always bring yourself back to that. And if you think back to your own childhood, you won't remember whether something was perfect or imperfect. You're remembering how you felt, right? So as families change, grow, traditions, rituals, they may change as well. And so giving yourself and others a little bit of compassion and empathy, and trying to be flexible as much as possible without shaking things up will be it will be tough, but it'll also be a balance, and kind of expecting that possibility will make it helpful. Something else that can manage expectations is sticking to a budget. So being realistic about what you can afford, and not just turning a blind eye to it because you don't want to think about it, and setting limits for yourself, not just for gift giving, but also thinking about how much money you'll spend on food. So many of us entertain and we just decide not to think about how much we're spending. For those of you that don't have to worry about that, great. But oftentimes, regardless of how much money you're bringing in, it's really easy to overspend during the holidays. So maybe having a conversation with those in the house about that, of course, age appropriate, and talking about the expectations of what are meant to be spent. A lot of people do, this is done with like Secret Santas, right? That's a great place to start. Making sure that if your kid has a Secret Santa, well, what's the max we're supposed to be spending on that, right? That can be helpful as well. If people know as far as what the budget is, then it can really help to go back to managing those expectations. Don't make promises that are out of your control. a big one here is promising that maybe somebody will be home for Christmas that you really can't control whether they're there or not. So for that, just don't make that promise. The promise that you can make is that maybe you'll try and help them be home, or that, those people are welcome, or whatever the case may be. But to say someone will be there that you're not sure will be, just, it's better not to make the promise, because then you're, ruining your own integrity for the sake of something you can't control. Okay. Remember, the only thing we can control is ourselves. So after that, it's all just how we react to everything else. Being realistic, right? Let's be real for a second. Learn how to say no. We don't have to go to everything, and we don't have to do everything. Okay. We don't have to make 300 cookies for some bake sale right before the holidays for the school or the church or the community. There are certain things that you might not just be able to do. Now, if that's your one volunteer giving activity for the season, and that's really important to you and your family, then okay, then you put in that extra effort. But really try and find a balance between what you're committing yourself to and your kids to, and what makes sense. You know your kids best, and you know you best. You know how much bandwidth you have. So being realistic about what you can handle will be important. And sometimes it's good to ask other adults that know you well where they think that threshold is, because sometimes other people can say, oh yeah, you tap out after X, or I've noticed that, after 30 minutes of being around so-and-so, you're done. That's good feedback, because then you can be better prepared for those things. Knowing when your kids are going to be done, especially when they're younger, the signs. And even if you're having a good time, you have to really think, okay, I know my kid's starting to get cranky. Do I allow my child to have a tantrum in front of all of these people, and I'm going to be okay with that? Or do I see the signs and find a way to give my child a place to lay down and take a nap or go to sleep until we're ready to go, or what have you? And maybe think through those things. Back to the planning, think through those things with other adults in your house to say, okay, well, if they get tired at X time, how are we handling that? So that you both are on the same page and you know how to leave. My husband and I actually have a physical signal that we give to each other when the one is saying basically like, it's time to go. So if any of you have ever seen like third base coaches in baseball where they give, hand signals and things like that, we do something similar to that, so that we're not saying it out loud, because sometimes we don't get a chance to talk, privately in social situations, but we have a signal we can give each other to say, hey, it's time to go. So that might be a good thing to think through as well. If you do that, you can still have a good time without having the stress of, oh my gosh, my kid had a meltdown in front of, 50 family members, and now everyone thinks my kid's a jerk. Managing that. And if your kid might have a short fuse, then tell your family ahead of time, hey, we're probably only gonna be there for a couple hours. It's not because we don't love you. It's because we all get tired and cranky, and we just want to spend good moments with you, and leave it at that. Okay. The second one we talked about was keeping a routine. I want to talk about health routines first. This is sleep schedules, workout routines, healthy diet. I know it's hard during the holidays. I also lose some of my routine too. What you don't want to do is say, oh, for the whole, month of the holidays, I'm just not going to worry about working out or keeping a good diet. That's a lot of time to give up for your body. And remember, what we put in our body, that food, is what's helping keep our immune system up. It's what's keeping our mood in a good place. And sleep helps regulate mood. It helps keep those happy neurotransmitters alive and well in our brains. Our workout routines help reduce cortisol, which is a stress hormone. So it helps us get it out of our bodies. So those routines that you've developed that are really healthy, it's really important to try and keep them in your day-to-day as much as possible. So try your best to do it. If you miss a day, be forgiving and compassionate to yourself, but don't let one day throw everything out the window for the whole holiday and say, oh, I'll just start it back up in January. Try to keep as many days in there as possible, because that will help you get through the more stressful days you have. The other side of keeping a routine is traditions. Kids not only feel much more secure and safe with routines, which is part of why you want to keep their school routines and things like that. They also really find a lot of enjoyment out of the routine of a tradition that comes with a holiday. So whether it's, an Easter holiday where you have a particular tradition, or Hanukkah or Christmas, whatever it is, whatever holiday it is, kids remember those and they look forward to them. So keeping that tradition alive as much as possible. And like I said earlier, some traditions may change, but trying to keep the heart of the tradition alive. So maybe a tradition is some sort of secret Santa among the family, but you have different family coming in that came in last minute. Well, then maybe, you still do the secret Santa, but you have maybe a store of a couple, candles that you didn't give out to teachers, something you can wrap up quickly and give to the people that you didn't know were coming, or maybe people share gifts, something like that, where you can try and think of ways to include everyone or keep a tradition that you've always done. Or maybe the tradition is baking cookies. If that was a tradition I had with my mom, she would bake so many different recipes. You know what? I don't need to bake 25 different cookies to feel like I'm honoring the tradition. If my kids and I get 3 cookie recipes in, we're pretty happy. If we only get 1, fine. The kids will just remember baking that 1 recipe. They won't remember whether we did 25 or 2. So doing your best to try and keep it. And I encourage you all to, create new traditions that are really aligned with your health and both your mental and physical health. Part of that, like I've said before, is, make it a tradition to foster gratitude, to volunteer and give back, and foster a tradition of quality time with you and your children during this time. Often we can kind of say like, oh, we just want to get away from the kids. We can't wait for them to go back to school. Try and find at least one day where the tradition is just to sit down and, do something simple with them, whether it's the baking of the cookies, which may or may not be simple depending on who you are, or playing a game of, playing a card game or something like that. That could be really simple, but your children will remember that because you're taking time just to be with them. Okay, so I promised I'd talk about this. Let's talk about active recovery. This is the downtime, scheduling downtime for yourself and your kids. If you know you've got to go to a particular family party where it's very intense, maybe your family's a little more introverted and you're going to the extroverted part of the family. Okay, well, you know that you and your kids are going to need a lot downtime, both before and after that party. So make sure you have a plan for that. If the party doesn't start until 5, make sure you have some quiet time at 3:30 or 4 where the kids are just supposed to sit and read a book. Let me be really clear about what active recovery is. Active recovery is not, playing video games, because that's not actually recovery time. Your brain is still active and it's in this weird kind of limbo state. It's not giving your brain a chance to actually have downtime. So active recovery can be sleep. Naps might be really important during the holidays if you have a really busy holiday. Alone time, where you do what it is that you like to do by yourself. Alone time is, while we're social species, we also all need a little bit of alone time. For some of us, it's recharging. For those that they're extroverted, they also need that time to get their energy level to come down for a few minutes so they can calm down and be able to sleep. So it can be reading time. Reading can be a form of active recovery, yoga, meditation, taking walks. Remember, we were talking about that vitamin D earlier with seasonal affective disorder? Get outside as much as you can. Listen for birds chirping. Pay attention to the birds that are going to the bird feeder, or notice if it's cold enough, if certain ponds are starting to freeze over, and look at the crystallization of the water with your kids. So all of these things, that's the type of active recovery we're talking about, right? Where we sit down, we relax, and we're just giving everyone a break from the hustle and bustle, the to-do lists, and all of that stuff. If you're able and you can go out and get some fun spa active recovery, wonderful, go do it. But make sure you schedule it, because we will all need it. You will need that recovery time. So I talked a little bit about this before. I'll just come back to it. When I talked about quality time and what that looks like with your kids, if your child's a little bit older and they're a gamer, it might mean getting on the video game with your child and playing a game together, right? Where you're in the same room, you're talking while you're playing the game. That can be fun. A lot of the families I know I do it with my family. We have, now I'm going to blank on the name of the video game, but it's the new version of DDR, and I totally just dated myself. But it's a game where we all get up and we dance to music and we have to imitate what's on the screen. My kids love it. It gets us exercising, and all of us can do it, right? And so that's actually fun. That's not active recovery, so to speak, but it is quality time. So this quality time can also be just sitting down and talking about people that we miss. Talking about our feelings might not be comfortable for everyone, but if you know there's someone that is very obviously absent from the holidays for whatever reason, take a moment to talk about that with your kids. It might feel stressful at first. However, that ability to share and talk about it will pay in volumes later in that holiday season for your kids, because they will remember that they had a chance to share something that felt unshareable or uncomfortable. So playing cards, board games, coloring. You can go online and get how to make real snowflakes. There's really beautiful ones that don't look like a square or a diamond. Tons of YouTube videos for that. Put one up and have you and your kids, if it's age appropriate, do them and see how they turn out, right? Baking and cooking can be quality time with your kids. Wrapping presents with your kids can be quality time. And also quality time with close friends can be really important too. And that can be part of kind of the active recovery and the giving each other space during the holidays. If you have teenagers, they're going to want to spend time with their friends, and that's okay. Just make sure they have a balance and you have a balance of spending time outside the family and with the family, so that everyone has kind of that balance. And again, going back to manage expectations, what does that look like, right? So question with this is, what's something else that you can do with your kids that's centered around being together and with each other that, could be something fun to do? I want you to think about that. And now I just want to come back, take a moment. We just went through a lot. Pause. Breathe. That little thing that I just did at any time during the holidays when you're feeling stressed, breathing in and then breathing out for longer than you breathed in will help bring your nervous system down. It'll help you deregulate or de-stress. So I often say breathe in for 4, breathe out for 6 to 8. And that will help bring your nervous system down and get you out of that fight, flight, or freeze, that chronic stress that you felt like you're in, whether that's from work or from your family or whatever. That type of breath can help bring you back to a more resting state. So, questions we asked at the beginning: what went well last year? What activities made the season special? Whatever those were, if you're able to do them again, do them again. Make them a tradition. Make sure that they're part of it, because it made last year special. So chances are it'll make this year special too. What were those major stressors last year? And now that we've just gone through all this different stuff, what are some things that you might be able to change to make things a little less stressful this year? Are there any of those shoulds that we talked about at the beginning of the talk that you can remove, right? Any of those things where you're like, oh, I really should go to the 10 holiday parties in my neighborhood because everyone's really expecting me. Should you? Or should you pick out a couple that either work because they fit in your schedule, they work because those families have kids that are your kids' ages and it'll be fun for them too? Whatever your reason, maybe only going to a few would be helpful. And if that really makes you feel guilty or bad, you can always reach out to the families you didn't go see and say, hey, December's really crazy. and we love the invite. Can we just plan to get together sometime in January or February? February and March are great times to see people because it's usually very quiet. Everyone's kind of in that lull of after the holidays, but it's still cold out. So people are still looking for things to do. Lastly, I want to leave you with this and a reminder, the holidays are meant to be joyful, and sometimes they will bring a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, and even sadness if we're missing people that were once in our lives that are no longer with us. Just remember that joy comes from within, that even if we're missing people, we can take a moment to remember them and a moment that we had joy with them. And those are the things that allow them to live on in a really positive way. If you're in the middle of a quarrel with somebody else, find it in yourself to just let it go for the holidays. Maybe you have to revisit the fight after, let it go and allow yourself to feel some joy over the holidays. And with that, I'm going to stop the recording, and I'll open it up for any discussion that people may have. For the people that will watch this later, thanks for joining. And always please tell people about Bay Communities Health Wellness Wednesdays and our parenting series. We're here every Wednesday evening from 6 to 7.